Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today I'm going to delve deep into the depths for a review of the Dungeon Fantasy / GURPS adventure, I Smell a Rat, an introductory adventure that's designed to be a good start for new players. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Dungeon Fantasy RPG is a version of GURPS, but streamlined and hyper-focused on old-school Dungeons & Dragons-like fantasy adventures. Heroes are specialists, motivated by looting and unafraid to dive deep into the earth to find legendary treasures. And just so you know where I'm coming from, I like Dungeon Fantasy quite a bit. I think it does a really great job at capturing the spirit of old school role-playing, but it isn't just another OSR clone. And because it's built on GURPS, you're going to get a solid set of rules that really handles tactical combat well. Elvish archers can take impossible eye shots, armored dwarves can wade into combat and ignore measly little goblin attacks, and barbarians can cleave heads off in a single blow. It's very visceral, and it does a great job at allowing for tons of character customization. It wears its love for the genre on its sleeve, and it has way better production value than a regular old GURPS product. I Smell a Rat is the adventure designed to introduce players to the Dungeon Fantasy RPG. In it, the heroes are asked to begin their adventuring careers much as many of us have, slaying rats inside of a basement. Now, surely there's something more to the adventure than that. Does I Smell a Rat hold up when compared to other great dungeon crawls? Is it worth your time to port this adventure to your favorite game system like Dungeons & Dragons or any of its OSR cousins? Well, grab your torches and 10-foot poles and get ready for some serious spoilers, because not only am I going to give you a review of I Smell a Rat, I'm going to give you GMs some tips and tricks on how to run this one like a pro. I Smell a Rat is written by Sean Punch, aka Dr. Crom, the main line editor behind GURPS and the man responsible for a ton of Dungeon Fantasy material. The adventure is only about 21 pages long, but in my experience it will take 2 full sessions to complete, especially if your players are new to the system. There's a lot of combat in this adventure, so the playtime is really going to depend on how fast you and your players can run fights. The more players you have, the longer this adventure is going to take. The setup of the adventure is this. The PCs are early in their career adventurers who are contacted by a woman named Lee. Lee's wealthy Uncle Merle runs several roadhouses in the area, but sadly he just died. When Lee went to take ownership of one of the inns, she found it abandoned and heard what she thought was giant rats in the cellar. Now obviously, you can't run a successful inn with giant man-eating rats eating your guests, so she's looking for exterminators and offers the PCs a nice bounty per rat they kill. Now, the twist here is that Uncle Merle was secretly a practitioner of the dark arts, and he and his sorcerer friends were using the inn's cellar to perform dark rituals and contact evil elder things. Now, this, as you could imagine, all went wrong, and poor Uncle Merle was horribly killed and possessed by one of the things that he foolishly tried to contact. In fact, his undead body still lurks somewhere in the basement of the inn. Now, his niece Lee knows a little bit of this story. She knows that Uncle Merle was a wizard of sorts and that he probably wasn't affiliated with the Wizards Guild like he should have been, but she doesn't know the full extent of what he was toying with. I do wish that the adventure gave Lee a little more character and motivation. Like, how does she know that her uncle died? How does she think he died? After all, there's no body. The PCs are going to ask these questions before they accept this mission, but the adventure is a little vague on how the GM should handle this. So what I do is I say that Lee received a letter from one of her uncle's good friends who sadly said that Uncle Merle died under mysterious circumstances and that Lee should go and take over his inns, but there's that one roadhouse that really is infested and she should just likely burn the whole thing down and just pretend like she never owned it. But being frugal, Lee was hesitant to do that, so she traveled to that inn and she went in, and instead she heard just what she thought was the big rats, and so she calls for exterminators rather than following the instructions. And if the PCs are good role players or have good social skills, they can convince Lee to share some more of this information. It'll give them a little bit more background and make them a little bit more suspicious about this inn, but it won't make a huge difference to the adventure that they know that kind of information. Okay, so inevitably the PCs will go down into the cellar. Lee says that she'll lock them inside, but just knock when they're ready to come out. But much to the PC's surprise, the cellar is covered in spider webs. There's no real signs of any giant rats. And immediately this adventure gets really dangerous really fast because not only can the PCs get stuck in these very strong webs, but there is, of course, giant spiders living in the webs ready to eat the PCs. The adventure smartly scales the danger with the number of PCs, but I will say these are really tough opponents early on in the adventure, especially if the PCs don't have a good mixed party with people who can burn the webs and just handle the spiders. These spiders are as strong as men, they're fast, and one of them can just knock out or paralyze a PC in a single hit. Like many GURPS adventures, how you play the bad guys in this adventure are going to make the difference between a fair fight and a total TPK. So if your players are newish, you probably want to play these spiders as a little dumb or cautious. Like maybe they circle the victims for a few turns before all out attacking so the spiders lose their defenses. But if your players are hardened veterans, then go ahead and have the spiders attacking them from behind, like jumping from above, biting people in the limbs to disable them. Go ahead and have bloody fun if your players are experienced. The cellar seems to be a dead end, nowhere else to go, but there are 2 secret doors in this very first room. And sometimes I've had players, especially ones a little rusty with dungeon crawling, not find these secret doors at all. But it's critical to the adventure that the players do find these secret doors, otherwise they might just hike back upstairs and tell Lee, "Yep, took care of your infestation, adventure's over, give me the XP." So GMs, you're gonna want to make it a little bit more obvious that there are secret doors down here. I like to have one of the spiders, as it's coming into attack, step on a pressure plate where the players hear a click and a sliding door somewhere nearby during the battle, just to give the players a hint that there's more to this room than what they see. Or GMs can just call for perception rolls to have the PCs feel a breeze coming through the wall. Just make sure your PCs find those secret doors. Once out of the cellar, the PCs soon discover that this basement is connected to the town's sewer systems, which is how the spiders were getting in. Now, the adventure doesn't really detail these sewers at all, other than giving you some random monster tables in case the PCs decide to go in that direction. So instead, I just tell the PCs that the water in the sewers is very deep this time of year and no doubt would be the source of the purple brain fever that is plaguing the town.
Fear not, friends. The sewer smells funny, but purple brain fever is just a myth.
Yeah, just start asking for some nasty health rolls for your players if they decide to wade in towards the sewers, and then they won't go off course. They'll turn right back around, which is fine because unless you as a GM want to create a whole dungeon of yourself for those sewers, you really don't want your players to waste time going in that direction. It's irrelevant to the adventure. More interesting is that near the entrance to the sewers, there is a door that leads to Uncle Merle's secret base of operations. There's a whole room system carved out in the earth here, and I like that this dungeon gives some history about itself. This inn used to be a hideout for a thieves guild, but it's been long forgotten. But there's still remnants of that thieves headquarters here under the earth, which include some storage rooms, prison cells, and traps. The old thieves guild contains about a dozen more rooms for the PCs to explore. And the adventure does a good job hinting at what Uncle Merle was up to as they explore. Soon they'll find some necromantic runes here and there on the walls, and then they'll find a ritual chamber, which is guarded by a fierce monster, a Peshkali, which is this six-armed, half-snake woman that seems to have stepped right out of a Ray Harryhausen film. She's a really cool villain. I love this Peshkali, but she's also really deadly. She can attack 6 times in one turn with her scimitars, which does enough cutting damage that I've seen her like literally cut in half the party like in one turn. So I am a little bit more restrained with her. I see her as sort of a horror movie villain like the Predator or the Alien, where once she's alerted and knows the PCs are around, she'll stalk them in the shadows. She like slowly follows them over the course of the adventure, just out of reach, like appearing to taunt them and promising death and maybe guarding the way back to the inn. Like she's waiting to kill the PCs on her own terms when the time is exactly right. This approach, I think, works way better than just kind of treating her as like a mini boss in the middle of the dungeon. Otherwise, the Peshkali is just going to shish kebab your players before they know what's happening. The rest of the rooms in this dungeon feature various blends between combat rooms, like encounters with zombies or demons from between the stars or elementals, like things you'd expect a mad sorcerer like Uncle Merle to have tried summoning. And there's also rooms filled with traps like leftovers from the Thieves Guild, or things like cursed altars, or this really cool greenish lab vapor that's sentient and like weirdly stalks the PCs through the adventure. The dungeon's rooms are all very flavorful. There's not any empty or boring rooms. There's enough variety that your players will stay interested the whole time. Now, like I've said, this is a dangerous dungeon, and I've definitely had PCs killed off going through it. Fortunately, even if you don't have a lot of healing in your party, your players can always return back to the inn, knock on the door, and go rest up with Lee before going back down. There's not really urgency to explore this dungeon, but you can easily add it. For example, you can say that in 3 days, like if the PCs haven't cleared the danger under the inn, Lee is just going to forget it and listen to the instructions her uncle's friend said and burn the whole place down and then go focus on her other roadhouses. This adds a nice timing element to the adventure. The PCs know they only have a few days to go clear out the evil, otherwise there just won't be anything left. Eventually, the PCs reach the end of the dungeon and find what's left of Uncle Merle, or at least his undead, possessed husk of a body which has been taken over by an unspeakable elder thing. As written, Uncle Merle is a pretty straightforward boss, like bad guy at the end of the adventure. The PCs spot him, and he starts immediately hurling eldritch blasts at him. I like to take a different approach with Uncle Merle because I like to toy with my players a little bit more. I leave some signs in the dungeon that maybe Uncle Merle is still alive down here, and then when they find him, they see him in the corner of a dungeon, like he's pleading for help, obviously hurt, and then when the PCs come close, then he turns into like Palpatine and starts cackling and gleefully killing them with lightning.
Oh good, you've come to rescue me, poor old Uncle Merle. Here, I have a candy for you.
Surprising your players is always more fun. And with Uncle Merle killed, the PCs have cleared the dungeon and they can celebrate with all of the loot that they found along the way. And there's quite a bit of cool loot to be found in this dungeon. There's weapons, there's spellbooks, potions, and even a human skin leather armor suit, which is gross but cool. But the PCs won't find like crazy powerful magic weapons or armor here, so this dungeon just won't immediately break any campaigns with overpowered magic items, which is smart for an introductory adventure. So that's I Smelled a Rat. So what do I think? Well, first, let's just acknowledge that this is a dungeon crawl, and I think of a great dungeon having 4 key qualities. First, a great dungeon needs a good balance of challenging encounters. Every room has to feel a little different. There should be a good fuel mix of exciting combats, interesting environmental obstacles, and fun but fair traps. And this adventure has a pretty good mix. The combats have varied opponents. Yes, they're tough, especially if you have less than 4 players, but I think that's okay for an adventure that's trying to capture the spirit of old school role-playing. The rooms have surprises and the traps are spread out and have a clear logic to them. Next, a great dungeon needs to tell a story as the players are exploring it. I'm not talking about a plot here with lots of NPCs. It just has to feel like the dungeon has a history to it. And again, I Smell a Rat does exactly that. You get a sense of why this place is overrun by spiders, and then discover that there was once a thieves guild here, and it's laid out in a way that makes sense. And then you get an idea of what Uncle Merle and his evil wizard friends were up to, and it culminates in finding undead Uncle Merle himself. Like, it all works, it all is logical and makes sense. And then I think a great dungeon has some flexibility to it because every player group is different, and the GM wants some tools to either accelerate the pace or slow the players down or surprise them if their players are getting overconfident. Great dungeons just need to give the GM ways to adjust the pacing and add some surprises. And I Smell a Rat does that. It includes this really great optional part of the adventure where some smugglers enter the dungeon to reclaim it for the Thieves Guild, presumably wanting to take ownership of it again now that Uncle Merle's been killed. And the smugglers give the GM a tool to add allies or rivals into the dungeon, while simultaneously giving the PCs who love to roleplay a chance to shine. Now, as a GM, you have to decide what you want to do with these smugglers, and you have some work to do to flesh these guys out. The adventure just doesn't provide that much information. Like, are they vile, stupid thugs, or perhaps they're charismatic Robin Hood types who are kind of setting up a rebel outpost? It's up to you. I prefer to put them somewhere in the middle, like they're on a job for the Thieves Guild, but they're not there to murder people, so they're willing to negotiate and talk. In fact, the last time that I ran this adventure, I made the leader of the smugglers the daughter of a famed pirate. She was looking to make her name in the Thieves Guild, and the group's bard charmed her with his wits, and a few hours later, they stood hand in hand, holding back a swarm of zombies so that both their groups of friends could escape the inn alive. And they would prefer to die together rather than separate from each other. It was tragic and amazing and heart-spoken. I like that I Smell a Rat gives the GM those tools. And finally, a great dungeon has a surprise, a twist, a turn, where the adventure takes the dungeon and makes it extraordinary. It's usually a room or an encounter that your players will always remember. Think back to classics like Tomb of Horrors that had that giant demon head on the wall that contained a sphere of annihilation in its mouth. The one that everybody who's played that adventure has a story about. Yeah, most of the stories went like that. Or White Plume Mountain with its terraced aquarium filled with horrifying creatures like manticores. Or Keep on the Borderlands with a prison cell that contained a Medusa. Or practically any Dungeon Crawl Classics adventure which delight at shocking players with twists they'd never see coming. The best dungeons have that one room when you hear a friend has played in that adventure, you look at them with that grin and you say, "And how did you handle that room?" And this is perhaps the only place where I Smell a Rat falls short. All of the rooms are well designed, but there's not one that just stands out above the rest. Not one that will subvert your players' expectations or give them an experience that they may have never seen before. And without that piece, it's hard to say that I Smell a Rat is a great dungeon. It's a solid one, and one that otherwise succeeds on so many levels. It's varied, it's easy to run, and it does everything you'd want an introductory adventure to do. But it just doesn't elevate itself above some of the other fantastic dungeons you might be able to find. So overall, I Smell a Rat is a fine adventure. It's well produced, it's well designed, it's a solid introduction to the dungeon fantasy or GURPS RPGs. If you're interested in giving those games a try and your players won't mind something that feels classic, maybe a little bit generic, then give this adventure a go. It's way better than many of the other official GURPS adventures out there. If you've played or run I Smell a Rat, I would love to know what your experience was like. Did your delve go as intended, or did everyone end up as Spider Chow? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, I'm JC, and just remember, if you're watching this wondering why the adventure named I Smell a Rat doesn't really feature rats, you're overthinking it. Just tell your players the spiders ate them all.